Welcome to America Now. I'm Don Brown. On this show, America Now, you will get information about things that are important to our country that you simply will not get anywhere else. And we encourage our viewers sometimes to take notes and to share these programs, as in many cases, the information that we share may be vital to our freedom, both as Americans and believers. We believe that today's topic is such a topic. What is today's topic? Former Defense Secretary James Mattis. Now, as you may know, the left-wing media recently went berserk when General Mattis, also known in some quarters as the Mad Dog, who served as President Trump's first defense secretary, announced his resignation effective the beginning of 2019. Immediately, congressional Democrats tried to portray the secretary's leaving as some sort of a national crisis. Watch this brief video from the Washington Post on this point.
Defense Secretary Jim Mattis resigned December 20th after clashing with President Trump on Syria and Afghanistan in recent days. His decision shocked many on Capitol Hill, as well as U.S. allies.
Reading Secretary Mattis's letter of resignation last night put a lump in my throat.
Ambassadors of a number of our European allies started to reach out to senators last night. What the hell's going on?
It is beyond scary. It is evidence of further chaos.
The retired Marine general's surprise decision came after Trump overruled advisors, including Mattis, by announcing a withdrawal from Syria and ordering the Pentagon to withdraw almost half of the forces in Afghanistan. In his resignation letter, Mattis said that the president deserves someone leading the Pentagon better aligned with his views. He did not offer any praise of Trump in the letter. The Pentagon released the letter moments after Trump tweeted that Mattis would retire.
He and the president have a good relationship, but sometimes they disagree.
Mattis has been with the Trump administration since the beginning.
All I can say is he is the real deal.
Many around the world and in Washington saw Mattis as a check on the president's impulses.
Note the consternation, all the hand-wringing. You'd think the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor again, or maybe the British were again marching on Lexington and Concord. For Senator Chris Coons, the resignation puts a lump in his throat. Oh, dear. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia describes it as, quote, beyond scary. Mattis is described as the one who, quote, kept President Trump in check and gave assurances to our NATO allies that we would not pull out of NATO, even though the president never threatened to pull out of NATO, only to require them to pay their fair share. But the left-wing media claimed that Mattis leaving is more evidence of chaos within the Trump White House. Watch this report from ABC News calling Mattis's leaving a, quote, shocking bombshell and claiming that it is, quote, shaking lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Mattis reassured European allies the United States would not pull out of NATO despite Trump's threats.
The alliance remains a fundamental bedrock for the United States and for all the transatlantic community, bonded as we are together.
Did you note that Martha Raddatz, the correspondent who brought us that report, is the same Martha Raddatz who broke down into tears on election night 2016? Watch this.
At an interview Tim Kaine gave, Tim Kaine has a son in the Marine Corps. He was asked by John Dickerson, so if Donald Trump is democratically elected and your son is serving as a Marine, you wouldn't trust his life under that commander-in-chief? And Kaine said, I wouldn't. That's a pretty extraordinary thing to say if you have a son in the Marine Corps and that you don't trust the commander-in-chief. The people in the military defend the Constitution.
Poor Martha cried on election night and claimed that Tim Kaine did not trust President Trump as commander-in-chief of his son. Oh, by the way, I also have a son in the Army who is a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I could not disagree more with Senator Kaine on this point. I trust all of our troops under this commander-in-chief. But anyway, the same weeping Martha Raddatz puts together this report bashing Trump's situation because Defense Secretary Mattis has resigned or perhaps was fired, so just take your pick. Now, the left-wing press would make you believe that Mattis resigned solely because of Syria and President Trump's desire to pull American troops out of Syria. But the truth is really deeper than that, and you deserve to know the truth. Now, our purpose here is not to bash or disrespect General Mattis. We honor him for his many years of service to our country as a United States Marine. We thank him and salute him for that service. But we must lay out the facts here to show you the rest of the story, evaluating not the general as a Marine, but rather as Defense Secretary. Aside from the president's differences with the secretary on Syria, there is a larger philosophical divide here. That starts with the issue of transgenders in the military. Our friend, General Jerry Boykin, the retired former Delta Force commander, and one of our board members here at MorningStar, has spoken out on this issue many times. He's spoken against the attempted emasculation of the United States military by social justice warriors. The general has spoken against using the military as a social laboratory for experimentation and opposed Obama's attempts to force transgenders into the military and then force military doctors to perform those transgender sex operations at government expense. Now, President Trump in 2017 carried out a promise to stop recruiting transgenders in the military. Watch this brief clip from General Boykin on Fox News.
So also developing tonight, a huge controversy as the White House releases new details on the plan to ban transgender people from serving in the military. Fox News has confirmed the guidelines that would include banning new enlistments, look at the deployability, of current transgender troops and whether they should remain in service, and stipulate that money will no longer be spent on medical or surgical treatments towards that end. Joining me now, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, who served as Deputy Under Defense for President George W. Bush. Also with us tonight, Robin Biro, the first openly gay Army Ranger who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you.
General Boykin, let me start with you. You have called this decision by President Trump bold and courageous. Why?
Well, I think that, first of all, we need to remember that this is something that he pledged to do. He talked to a group of us veterans, many of which were retired flag officers back in October of last year, and this was one of the issues that came up, and he pledged to make this decision. So following through on this decision was very bold because he took on the entire LGBT community in doing so. But he did it because it's a common sense decision to make, and we applaud him for doing that.
Why is it common sense?
It's common sense because in no way can you demonstrate that recruiting or retaining transgenders in our military enhances our readiness. Remember that this is about the fundamental mission of the military, which is to win wars. If it enhances that ability, then it's a good thing to do. But you can't make a case that this enhances readiness in any way. Therefore, we should not do this.
General Boykin is right. But here's the problem. Just as soon as the president, who is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, announced that he was ending this politically correct recruitment of transgenders and ending government-paid-for transgender sex operations in the military, his defense secretary, Secretary Mattis, took action which appeared to oppose the president's order. The very following day, following the president's announcement about ending transgender recruitments, Mattis took it upon himself to issue a freeze on the president's order to stop recruiting and paying for transgender sex operations in the military. In an article published on August 30th, 2017, the Washington Post headlines proclaimed, quote, Mattis hailed as a hero for defying Trump on transgender policy. But did he? And the article opens up with these words. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was trending on Twitter overnight, praised by the LGBT organization GLAAD and hailed by some as a hero for openly defying Trump by disregarding the president's order. Some on Twitter confessed they never thought they would be cheering on generals or ex-generals for refusing to carry out the orders of the commander-in-chief. And then, in an article that appeared in the publication called The Hill on August 13th, 2017, the headline proclaimed that, quote, military pushes back on Trump's transgender ban. Excuse me? The Secretary of Defense is defying the President of the United States on setting recruiting policies for the troops, when the Constitution makes the President and not the Secretary of Defense Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and the military under Secretary Mattis is pushing back against the President? Ladies and gentlemen, at that point, frankly, President Trump should have fired Secretary Mattis so quickly that it would make your head spin. That he allowed such insubordination to go on for so long is the real head-scratcher here. Senior members of the military, most who were appointed to their ranks today, still by President Obama, should not have been allowed for 1 second to push back, and especially not to push back publicly against the President's directive on his policies for recruitment of troops. That, my friends, is insubordination in the ranks. It appears that the President and the Secretary were at odds philosophically on some of the most important issues about troop recruitment, notably the recruitment of transgenders and the government payments for transgender sex operations for troops, long before the Syria decision ever came along. It is the duty of the United States military to obey the lawful orders of the President of the United States. The President's order on curbing recruitment of transgender troops does not violate the Constitution and is designed to improve troop morale and readiness and to avoid the waste of time and money on immediate surgeries and psychological counseling of transgenders that often occurs in situations where they try to join the military. The most important goal, my friends of the United States military, is to win wars, not to serve as a social laboratory for social experimentation. As General Colin Powell once said, the purpose of the Army is to kill people and break things, not to serve as a social laboratory experimenting place where you can simply come up with any idea you want. But there is another issue involving General Mattis that made his appointment uncomfortable for me personally from the beginning. Yes, General Mattis is portrayed in public as the mad dog. President Trump apparently likes this persona, as the general did carry a tough guy image for sure. But then there is the issue of Extortion 17. Many of you know that I wrote the book called Call Sign Extortion 17, The Shootdown of SEAL Team 6, which documents the largest loss of life in the Afghan war, in which 17 members of the vaunted SEAL Team 6 and 13 other Americans were shot down when their helicopter was deliberately flown into a Taliban trap. Now, our military knew about that trap, and we knew about it because we saw that helicopter flying into the trap because we had an AC-130 gunship flying overhead above that helicopter that saw the whole thing. The AC-130 asked for permission to fire on the Taliban, the same Taliban that we believe shot down the helicopter, but the AC-130 was denied permission by our own military. This was the largest cover-up in the history of the U.S. military, and General Mattis was involved. Now, I'll explain why in just a second. But of course, there is a human toll and loss of life and pain and grief and suffering when we lose any of our service members. Watch this brief video from my good friend Billy Vaughn, where Billy spends a moment talking about his son Aaron, who died on the shootdown of Extortion 17, and about the cover-up of the shootdown of Extortion 17.
And, Aaron,
your son, Aaron
would be so proud. But these men are here today to represent me, Karen, and the families who are here, only because Aaron died, only because our sons died. Our sons were willing to give all for this republic. And today, we look for answers from a government who has failed to give answers, who has, at best, covered things up. And we don't know how serious it is. It may not be that serious. Please give us the answers. Or it may be far more serious than they're willing to say. We do know that there has been a cover-up. We do know that they refused to give us the right answers. We know that they gave us a debriefing. In the debriefing, told us a few things, but as Karen and I began to investigate, because our congressman at the time, Tom Rooney, was lied to in a classified meeting in Washington, D.C. by a high-ranking military official, Karen and I began to investigate. And as we investigated, the more questions that we tried to find answers to, the more questions we got. And Republic, that this government, this United States government, this administration in Washington, D.C., and high-ranking military officials allowed their bodies to be desecrated at the ramp ceremony at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan.
You're gonna show that video later on?
We are going to show the video.
Okay,
and you will
great.
see.
These are the words of a father in pain who cannot get answers from his own government about what happened to his own son. Now, when I reviewed the military record of Extortion 17 and subsequently wrote the book, I discovered several things that had been covered up. First, as mentioned, that AC-130 gunship was circling overhead and could have shot down and taken out the insurgents who took out that helicopter. That gunship asked permission to fire but was denied based upon liberalized Afghan-centric, Islamo-centric rules of engagement under Obama. Additionally, moments before takeoff, 7 unidentified Afghans jumped on the chopper. Just a few minutes before takeoff. We don't know who they were. They appear to have been cremated and their bodies flown to the United States. They could have been terrorists who jumped on the inside of that chopper and started something from the inside. The chopper was over 6 minutes late in landing and we lost communication with it. I reviewed what was the classified military report and then later declassified at the time I reviewed it. In that report, we discovered that an unidentified coalition, a military coalition, a unit approached a helicopter on the ground as it was burning only minutes after it was shot down. That unit surveyed the aircraft and left, and we believe that unit may have taken the black box from the chopper, which would give us clues as to what happened inside. The military claimed that black box was washed away in a flood. Unbelievable. Now, all this information, and more important, the information that was kept out of the military report on Extortion 17 is in a situation where our government appeared to have approved of this shoot-down. What officer signed off on the report from this great cover-up? Which military officer ultimately put his name on the final report? Well, you might have guessed it. General James Mattis. General Mattis commanded Central Command at that time at MacDill Air Base in Florida and was appointed to that position by President Obama. Now, the moment I heard that General Mattis had been nominated by President Trump to become Defense Secretary, I had grave concerns because his fingerprints are all over the Extortion 17 cover-up. My friend Billy Vaughn, who lost his son Aaron, you just saw this video, who also knew that Mattis' fingerprints were on Extortion 17, also had concerns. Now, if you want to read about it, of course, you can read the book, my book that I wrote on Extortion 17, which is available here at MorningStar and also online on Amazon. My guess is that President Trump, though, never knew about this cover-up, nor did he probably even know that the report was signed off on by General Mattis of this cover-up. Please, though, continue to pray for our military, pray for the Department of Defense, and that we will have senior leadership in the military which will put God first, then put America first after God, and then will follow the constitutional duties that they have sworn to follow to obey the orders of the Commander-in-Chief. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, I'm Rick Joyner, and we try to put together specials that kind of water the seeds that are planted by our programs, and I think this is a tremendous one. I can't believe the price that we're offering here, but I wrote a book a few years ago called I See a New America, and it was some things I believe I had been shown about what's going to unfold, what's going to ultimately come here, especially about our government and the things that are helping us, that are hurting us, and the trends. And I had several congressmen that I met who were in Congress. They said they ran their campaigns based on what I wrote in this book. And I also met a few guys who ran on what I wrote in this book, and they didn't win. But I think these things are coming to pass. I think you're going to see there's some of the answers to issues, and we're called to be the salt and the light. And I was just inquiring of the Lord for words of wisdom about our country here, but I think these principles apply to many other countries. If you haven't seen Don Brown's programs on America Now, but Don Brown is an incredible writer. We're including Don Brown's book, Detained, a great action novel, I See a New America, and Don Brown and I did this 11-segment series on the Constitution. And we're offering all of those, that entire series on the Constitution, these two books valued at $65.98. We're giving them to you for $35, and that includes shipping.
Welcome back. This brings us to our thought for the day, which comes from the philosopher Plato, who said, "We are twice armed if we fight with faith." And our good news from the day comes from the short book of Titus, chapter 2, verse 13, which states that we wait for the blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who indeed is coming again soon. Well, that's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you back next week. Until then, remember, America first, America always. God bless America.